What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome back to another miniature rescue. Today we're going to continue work on a pretty nasty eBay army and paint up some red orcs. This video is sponsored by Ravaged Star, a new line of highly detailed sci-fi miniatures from the team over at Mini Wargaming, but more on that in a little bit. Not too long ago, I managed to snag a great deal on eBay for a pretty beat up orc army. The cleanup and repair process was quite long for this army, as there were some missing pieces and a good portion of the army was partially painted. But I managed to gather extra bits and models from my personal collection to fill out the model count and make this a proper Age of Sigmar army. Honestly, the really nice thing is that it didn't take much to do that. Filling out this army, that is. The cleanup work was a bit of work. Something I've really started to notice and appreciate the more that I play Warhammer games is that having a relatively simple army makes the game a lot better. I don't mean that the army is necessarily simpler to play or that the complexity is lacking. What I mean is the amount of options or models are limited. I've had an Ironjawz army for Age of Sigmar for quite some time, and since they came out, there really haven't been a ton of additions for the army. You have your basic troops in the Ardboys, more elite choices in brutes, mounted orcs, and some character models that do specific things for those troops, and some larger boss choices to round out the army. It's pretty straightforward. What I like about that is how it feels when you actually build your army. You don't really have to guess what's going to work and what isn't. The options are limited enough to give you a good sense of how the army should play and how you can accomplish specific goals in the game. Obviously, this particular army is one piece of a larger pie, and that's really where you can start to get more complicated and add tons of different types of models to the army. But at its core, it's just a simple, relatively low model count army, and I love that. Here's the army so far. Everything has been fixed up, primed up, and ready to go, and I have a pretty good idea on how I want to paint these. Again, having a limited amount of model types will make it easier to get this army painted and ready for some games. There are differences in each type of model that make them a unique challenge on their own, but the colors should be able to go down in a similar way and order over the course of the entire project. Today, I am focusing on the brutes. These models are some of the finest orcs Games Workshop has made, and there are a ton of things to like about them, from a painting and playing perspective. They are bulky, with really nice armor details, and not too overloaded with details, also lending to painting them even quicker. In particular, I like the blank canvas aspect of the skin and armor. What I mean by that is how there aren't a ton of details clogging up those spaces, so you have a ton more opportunity to do some fancy colors, tattoos, markings, whatever you like, to differentiate your brutes from all the other ones on the table. Today I will be painting 20 Ironjawz brutes, and that's not exactly a small amount of models. So in order to do that, we need to make sure the plan is solid. Not only will having a plan make these 20 models go quicker and at a higher quality, but the rest of the unit should go relatively quick as well. Ravaged Star is a new line of highly detailed sci-fi miniatures for use in your favorite tabletop games. This crowdfunding campaign is for the first faction, the Veil Touched, and includes corrupted soldiers hell-bent on destroying any and every planet within their vast reach. The great news is that this campaign is already funded. Not only will there be a massive set of really cool chaotic miniatures, but a boatload of reinforcements as well. One of the things that I like the most about this campaign is that these models are not 3D printable STLs. They will be shipped plastic miniatures, so you don't have to worry about what's next with these guys. Just open the box of minis and get to work. I got a chance to get my hands on a few of these miniatures, and I've got to say they are really nice. This week I painted up a really sweet model from the Ravaged Star lineup. It's called the Scourgebringer, and it's part of the Dominaran War Pack. This was another model that just stood right out of the lineup for me, and I really wanted to paint it up. Not only does it look awesome, but it was very fun to paint, and it even inspired me to try some new things. I went for it a little bit and tried to do some non-metallic metal for all the armor bits, and I think it actually turned out pretty well. Then again, I could still use more practice, but maybe when the rest of these models get shipped, I'll need to sit down and put in that work. On top of that, I did some war paint on that sweet mask. All in all, a very enjoyable model, and I seriously can't wait till the rest of these guys get shipped out so I can add them to my already growing band of Dominaran minis. What's nuts is that these are just from one of the packs available right now. There are so many incredible minis in this campaign that it's really hard to pick. You definitely don't want to miss these models when they ship out. They have been fantastic to look at and even more of a joy to paint up. Check out the links in the description below and follow the campaign so you don't miss out on a ton of amazing miniatures. A massive thank you to Mini Wargaming and Ravaged Star for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to those other minis. I'll be starting with the skin on these orcs, mostly because there are some hard to reach areas near the faces, and we don't want to be poking our brush through the armor to try and paint a nice red skin tone on these guys. I'm also using an airbrush to speed up this process and get a really smooth and way more interesting skin tone than I could with just a brush in the same amount of time. If we want a unique and interesting red skin tone, then purple is a great place to start. It makes for a nice shadow and helps the red go down even better. I will be applying that color to all of the models before moving on as well. This keeps things moving and consistent between a whole bunch of models at the same time. Next up will be the main tone for the red skin, and our first major decision for these models. How much shadow do we want showing through? I always run into this problem where I paint shadows and then the next color covers up 99% of that paint. It's still sort of visible, but what's the point? If you are airbrushing a transition, there needs to be an actual transition from one color to another, or else why not just use a brush and layer up the colors like normal? I want these brutes to look vibrant and have some real contrast in the skin, so I only spray about 75% of the skin with that red. It seems weird at first, but leaving a lot of that shadow color will make this red skin look even better. Finally, we need to really bring in that red, so I grab a bright highlight red and start to lay that down. The same idea applies here. You want to see that transition between all of the colors, and use a highlight as an actual highlight and not just another layer. So I pick out the hands, the face, and a little bit of the back just to brighten it up and help that stand out. The result gives us a very nice swing from the shadow color to the highlight, and the contrast really makes the red look a lot brighter and more vibrant. I painted some brutes using the same color workup about a year ago, and they look alright, but using a little bit of restraint, not covering up too much of each layer with the next, really makes a big difference. And I think this iteration of red skin is way better than before. Alright, so the skin is pretty much done. Time to put the airbrush away and get into base coating the rest of the models. Luckily, since these models aren't too over the top with added bits and details, there are only a couple of colors that we need to bring out in order to get these guys painted up. I filled in the armor with a medium silver. We are going to end up weathering this down quite a bit, but we can always bring that color back up with a quick dry brush over the top. For that weathering, I like to use a couple of different colors. MIG makes a set of rust paints that comes in a trio of colors: brown, reddish brown, and an orange. All of these paints come out a little watery and dry with a very matte finish to them. Using this sequence makes the metal look like it has a bunch of old rust on it, with hints of newer rust in specific areas. It's also very fun to apply because you can really tell the story you want with each piece of armor. Another thing I like to do for rust is to put some gritty texture over the armor. There are several technical paints out there that are the proper shade of brown to start rust with, and there are little bits of sand in that paint to make that texture. Starting there and then adding the brighter rust is a great way to go, and you get some nice broken up armor that isn't just smooth all over. The point is, there are a ton of different ways to do it, but you don't really need anything other than a brown and an orange paint to make it look pretty awesome. The leather bits all get a coat of brown, pretty nondescript really, and to bring in more color I paint all the straps with a dark blue-green. I like this on the straps because it's a little bit different from normal leather straps and it stands out pretty well on the weapon handles. Also, it saves a little time in that I really don't have to paint the leather straps and wooden handles different shades of brown. It's not a huge time saver, but over the course of an entire army, I'm sure it's going to add up enough. In my head, that's what it seems fine. Going through each model, I repeated each step until everything was pretty much filled in. And then I came back to each model and decided to do one more round of highlights using orange as well as some freehand markings. More than a little inspired by that Ravaged Star mini that I painted this week as well. The orange is specifically Fire Dragon Bright from Games Workshop. I still haven't found a better orange to highlight red with. If you want a vibrant, fiery look to something, there is pretty much no better paint. Going over some of the more prominent facial features as well as the knuckles and some of the muscles on the body. This step really takes these from tabletop to something a little bit nicer. And since I saved that time with airbrushing the skin, this is exactly where I need to be spending that extra time just to make these models look even better. For the markings, I did a couple of things. First, on the face, I painted a pretty fat line of white. I want it to look like it was applied by hand so it doesn't have to be straight or really follow a perfect path. Once that dries, I take a little contrast paint and stain the area. This achromatic blue contrast kind of gives it a little magical vibe as well, which I really like, and it adds a nice vibrant color to the model. Finally, I come back in with that white and follow the original line down the face, except I really want it to be thinner and more precise so we get that glowy blue look from that contrast paint. You can really go kind of crazy with this stuff and give each one of your models something extra and fun. For this army, it brings in a spot color that we can use when we need a little bit of an extra kick of color, and it makes these guys look different than most brutes that are out there. For some of them, I also used the larger spaces on their backs as a quick little canvas. Random lines and symbols are fun to do, pretty quick, and look pretty great on these models. I did the same thing with the white lines, blue paint, and then white again. This also plays into why I like Warhammer armies that are just simpler than other ones. These models are really nice, but they aren't overcomplicated with stuff all over them. They're relatively quick to paint up, offer an unlimited variety of style and color, and opportunities for some freehand. Not all models can offer that much at the same time, and I think that's worth highlighting. I should definitely mention that I don't have anything against more complex army builds. I think the fact that you can add whatever orc models you want into an army definitely has its place, but being able to simplify an army down to its core components and know that you have something solid feels like a way nicer place to start, and something that I wish every armor offered on some kind of level. Look at you, Space Marines. So now we have the largest model count part of this army finished. A solid plan for painting the rest of the army, and a few fun tricks to pull out when we want to take the time and have a little more fun. The rest of this army should go together rather quickly, although I am still planning on making at least one more video in this series before wrapping it all up. This guy right here has been fun so far, and there's still a ways to go until he's table ready. Also, there just needs to be more cabbage dragons out there, so we're going to make this happen pretty soon. Thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.